This is a super common question. You can never have too big of a turbo, I suppose, technically, but you can absolutely have too small of one. So the ECM can only do so much, the engine control module can only do so much for fuel mixture based upon what it's seeing for inlet fuel, which people commonly think of as just diesel or just gasoline. Our motor's obviously just diesel, but they don't think about oxygen as fuel, and they totally should. And so when you see that truck and it's barreling down the road and spewing black smoke everywhere, that's unburnt fuel. And people, say, "Oh, that's really cool." Well, it's unburned fuel, and so your motor's running too rich, and you're just not having enough air, and that's why it quote cleans up at higher RPMs. All right, so what do you do? This is a conversation about spool up time. So maybe you want to get a ball bearing turbo, something like that. But it's also a conversation about how much air is being fed in compared to how much fuel is in the form of diesel, in this case, is also being fed in. And what's that careful balance? So if you're running stock injectors, you can run up to a stage one turbo and be happy with your experience, I would think, for most people. You'll get pretty nice throttle response because the stage one turbo, and we were like the ones from KC, we sell a ton of them. I would tell you that those turbos, they spin up better than the OEM one ever did, and so that kind of offsets the fact that the impellers are a little bigger, and so they push more air, and so you end up with very similar, possibly even a little better throttle response off the line than you had with your stocker guy, while increasing top end power. And you might say, "Well, that sounds perfect. I'll stop listening now." But wait, there's more. So if you were to go ahead and get like a stage 1.5 or a stage 2, all of a sudden you're going to say, "Well, hey, my spool up times are way longer here. I'm not necessarily loving this." And in addition to that, what I'm also seeing is that, well, in addition to spool up times being longer, I just can't seem to not, I can't seem to get the power that I should have, and that's because the turbo is never really getting enough fuel to spin up to its full potential, because why? Your injectors are too small. So if you just need a turbo and you know you're going to keep your injector stock, or the most you'd ever get is like 155/30s, I would say get yourself a stage 1 turbo. If, however, you're just like, "Man, I've heard from that Ed guy at FICMRepair that the more power I'm pushing, the better fuel economy I'm getting," if that's the world you're living in, then I would tell you, get a stage 2 turbo. And if you get a stage 2 turbo, then all of a sudden, you're going to be really unhappy with your stage 2 turbo. You will. In the beginning, with stock injectors, you're going to be like, "This thing spools up worth a flip. I hate my life. Why did I do this to myself?" Etc. Until you make the choice to pick up some bigger injectors. So now all of a sudden you pick up injectors to properly match what that turbo does, and you haven't thrown good money after bad, and now you're ridiculously happy. And so it's like, So it really depends on what the wallet looks like and what future proof you want to do. There is really no upgrade path for a turbo. If you buy a stage 1 turbo, for example, you've bought a stage 1 turbo, for example. And so if you want to get a stage 2 turbo, for example, well, then you got to buy a stage 2 turbo, for example. And so it's like, so that's how that works. Well, yes, it is. And so now it's like, what's the rest of the story here? What do I want to do? And so just your basic question, I'd buy a stage 1 KC, buy it at FICMRepair.com, and install it and move on. But if you see injectors in your future and you want to get something to help you out for the future a little more, then you can go ahead and get a stage 2 turbo. Now, I will tell you that even with a stage 2 turbo, even with properly sized injectors, even with a properly sized intercooler, even with injectors that that are set for that particular size turbo, you're still going to have that puff of black smoke off the line. So if you tow, number one, and you tow heavy, number two, and you tow heavy in the mountains, number three, I will tell you that maybe you don't want all that. Maybe you just want to stick with that stage 1 turbo if you do primarily city type stuff. However, you're going to limit your top end. And so if you want all the top end power, that's where a stage 2 comes in. So I'm a little all over the place in this video, and I certainly understand that, but hopefully now, by just kind of walking you through the scenarios, you have an idea of what your money's buying and what kind of solution you can have. And obviously a stage 1.5 is just, well, it's halfway between, right? And then there's the whole ball bearing versus not conversation and everything else. And it recognizes that this whole stage 1, stage 1.5, stage 2, stage 3 turbo conversation, it's all marketing. What you really do want to do is you want to look at the impellers and say, hey, how big is this wheel? And don't be discounting what 1 millimeter will do. This is the old formula, and it's related to exhaust, I guess. People commonly say, well, I got a 3.5 inch exhaust. There's no way that a 4 inch exhaust is going to make all that much of a difference. Yeah, it will. It's the old formula pi r squared, right? So if you go ahead and you take the 3.14 number and you take the radius of 1.75 and you square it, what you're going to find is that that's not nearly as impressive as a number as if you take 4 inch exhaust and pi r squared that. And what you'll see is that the cross section, there's a 25% increase in airflow with a 4 inch exhaust versus a 3.5 inch exhaust. Man, I had no idea that extra half inch mattered so much. Abso-freaking-lutely. It's the same conversation for turbos. So just take a look at the impeller sizes, and you can also take a look, and you look at the product pages on the stage 1, the 1.5, the 2, the 3 turbos on FICMRepair.com. And what you'll see is that just 1 millimeter, and all of a sudden the world is your oyster from what injectors this pairs nicely with. And so it's like, So these are just things to consider, things to think about. What's the future look like? What's the bank account look like? And then what do you want to do with this, and kind of go from there. All right. So very, very good. I appreciate the question very much. Put your comments in there, and we'll see if we can address those, and onward and upward. So we appreciate you. FICMRepair.com. We're all in this together.